Okay, we're in Megillat Esther, Perek Daled, Psukim Tes Vav through Yud Zayin. It's the second part of this chapter. Last week we did the first part of the chapter. Now we're doing the second part. It's Esther's evolution into leadership. In the first part of this chapter, as you'll remember, we saw how Mordechai was the one who had to stimulate and had to promote Esther and had to convince Esther that she was placed in the palace for one reason and one reason only, and which was to save the Jewish people. That's why she's there. But she didn't realize it, and he was way ahead of her. So Mordechai, in the first part of the chapter, has to promote Esther, has to convince her to become the leader to save the people. And that's what he does. And he realizes that his ego has to be put on the back burner, because totally she's going to become the major figure of the story. In this part of the chapter, the end of Perek Daled, Esther assumes the role as leader. She assumes it, and she now directs the story. She becomes the major character, and she even gives the book its name because of that. And the Rav studies these psukim to discern what characteristics Esther uses in leadership and what characteristics we thereby can learn from her to this very day for our own lives. And you'll see in a few moments. So let's begin with Daled Tes Vav on page 1256. Vatomer Esther lashiv el Mordechai. And Esther replies to Mordechai. Leich keno, because he convinced her that now you have to go. And she warned him, I haven't been invited. And the rule is, if you're not invited to see the king and you come unannounced, you can be killed. So Vatomer Esther lashiv el Mordechai. Now Esther gives her answer to Mordechai. Leich kenos es kol hayudim animsaim b'Shushan v'tzumu alai v'al tochlu v'al tishtu shloshet yamim laila v'yom gam ani v'na'arosai atzum kain u'v'chein avo el hamelech asher lo chadas v'chasher avadati. Now go assemble all the Jews to be found in Shushan and fast for me. Do not eat, do not drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will also fast at the same time. And then I will go to the king, though it's unlawful. And if I perish, I perish. Im v'chasher avadati. Vayavor Mordechai vayas kol asher tzivisa alav Esther. And Mordechai then left and did exactly what Esther had requested. These are the psukim. These are the few last psukim of the Perek, but they are replete with crucial information about how Esther becomes the leader and what are the characteristics that she demonstrates. Start at the very beginning. Leich kenos es kol hayudim hanimsaim b'Shushan v'tzamu alai. She says, now go and gather everybody together, and they're going to fast together with me, right? Night and day for 3 days. The Rav notes that historically women taught us how to pray to Hashem. We know that. Who was the major figure in Tanakh that taught us how to pray? Chana, the figure of the Haftorah on day 1 of Rosh Hashanah. Day 2 is not Chana, it's Rachel Mevaka Abonel. 2 of the most beautiful Haftorahs of the year are Rosh Hashanah's Haftorahs. But the first one is Chana crying, Chana beseeching HaKadosh Baruch Hu for a child. And the Gemara in Brachos doesn't mince words. The Gemara in Brachos, Lamed Aleph, Amid Aleph, credits Chana with being the source of who taught us how to daven. Quote unquote, the Gemara. Many halachot have been derived from the psukim relating to Chana's tefillah. Chana is the one who taught us how to daven. And the Rav stated that the story of Esther once again confirms the difference between the role of a man and the role of a woman. The style of leadership of men and women are not identical. The Rav, and I quote his words, the inspired charismatic woman is superior to the inspired charismatic man in 2 areas. In 2 areas. The woman, the inspired charismatic leader who is a woman, is far superior than the man in 2 particular areas. The area of applied practical thinking, how to make something happen, The woman is far superior than the man, and the area of tefillah, the area of prayer. Esther, like Hannah, taught us how to daven, right? Lech kenosas kol hayudin. You're going to be davening for me. I'm not going to do this alone. But Esther was different than Hannah. Esther didn't focus on the individual. Rather, she focuses on whom? On the community. She's going to teach us how the community davens. Esther also taught us an art totally different than prayer. Prayer, we're going to come back to prayer in a moment. Prayer is one, but what was the other art? The implementation of a good strategy. She knew that better than anyone. She taught us how to respond to crisis that confronted her in a concrete fashion. Here she's dealing with crisis, right? And she figures out, she is the one who strategizes and knows how to implement the entire response. She had a clear thinking. She was a clear thinking approach and allowed her to apply her strategy brilliantly. She mastered the art of what the Rav quotes, cunning. She was cunning. We think of cunning in the negative. It's not. If you look up the word, cunning is not a negative, pejorative word. It's different than slyness. Slyness is pejorative. Cunning is brilliant. It's a positive attribute. It's a person who has experienced life and is mature, because to be cunning means that you strategize. You have an ability to come up and to come with a strategy. You devise a scheme to use, to pursue, and at the same time, not overlook any detail. The devil is in the details. It is in the details. Anybody who knows how to administrate and knows how to implement administration knows that if you if you overlook a detail, your whole plan can come crumbling down. Right? We just saw that, for an example. We just saw that with the army when the IDF went in and saved those 2 hostages. They planned that for weeks in advance. And according to all of the reports, they went down to the last detail as best as they can, of course. And then you have to strategize. You have to strategize, and then what do you have to do? You have to implement it. And in that situation, detail is so, so crucial. It is. In any crisis, detail is crucial. Esther was appointed to the most important political position, the Rav notes. Hashem places her in the most critical position because she has the talent, much more than Mordecai. Mordecai doesn't have this talent of strategizing, of being cunning, and of focusing on detail. She mastered the art of being cunning. This is the words of the Rav. In other words, she was a mature political thinker who knew how to make things happen. She implements. It's one concept of strategizing. There's another concept of, okay, I got a plan. How do I implement that plan? A lot of people have dreams. How do you take that dream? Baal HaChalomot. What's a Baal HaChalomot? Yosef was a Baal HaChalomot. He was in control of his dreams. Baal means you're in control. He was able to strategize. That is correct. And of all, Esther is the one par excellence. By the way, Chazal compare Esther and Yosef constantly. The words in the Megillah and the words on the Yosef story are very similar, and not by accident. Yosef is from that line of, if you will, of descendants. Esther is from that line of descendants, right? She inherits that talent that Yosef has. And this aspect of Esther's personality is revealed throughout the rest of the story. If you want to understand Megillat Esther from here on to the very end, to the last pasuk in Perek Yud, it is understanding Esther as being the cunning one who implements the strategy. On the other hand, that's one aspect of Esther. On the other hand, she manifests the talent of teaching us how to daven. The art of prayer is not a mature art. It's a childlike art, the Rav notes. The mature person is a cynic by nature. He's skeptical. He's too practically minded. He's too tough and insensitive. Maturity ennobles and corrupts the man at the same time. It ennobles and corrupts the man at the same time. Tefillah, prayer, happens when one feels overwhelmed by emotion. If you think about it, what is your ultimate experience during tefillah? It's an emotional one, a spiritual uplifting. Wow, I'm carried by the song, I'm carried by the tune, I'm carried by the moment. It's an emotion. It might be an emotion of desperation. People daven when they're desperate, or it might be just the opposite, right? It's hallel. It's the emotion of total success, the euphoria that enraptures a person when he's victorious. And he turns to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and what does he do? Emotionally, he thanks the Borei Olam. Prayer is an expression of either complete resignation or complete ecstasy. That's the total, ultimate tefillah. It's an emotional experience. Adults tend not to experience emotion unlimited. That's the difference between a child and an adult. An adult tries to fend off the tidal wave of emotions. We're more restrictive. That's the way we act. A child, however, the nature of a child is he responds spontaneously. His emotions are spontaneous. I watch my grandchildren. I see it all the time. That makes the child beautiful and innocent. And you, the adult, are watching that and you're saying, hey, I can't do that, because a child is an expression of emotions, spontaneous emotions. He never tries to censor himself. A child doesn't censor herself, right? That's what do we say? The truth comes to the mouth of babes, because, right? And he fluctuates. You watch little children. I watch my grandchildren. They fluctuate from despair to joy, experiencing many emotional states all at the same time, it looks like, right? The distress of a child is boundless. It is. The distress of a child is boundless. And there is no limit to a child's happiness. A child, more than an adult, knows the art of praying from mimamakim, from the depths. Also knows better than an adult how to sing Hallel better than an adult. What does this all mean? Well, it all means that the Jew needs to be an adult and a child all wrapped into one. That's exactly what the Jew needs. When we are called upon to be an agent of God. What does that mean? It's a response that we need cunningness. We need maturity on the one hand. We need to be courageous and intellectually developed on the one hand. And on the other, we need to appreciate prayer, right? The child and man must surface. And yet, at the same time, the mature adult must not be pushed totally aside. The woman, unlike the man, the woman, the Rav notes, unlike man, is able to play this double role much better than man, all brought together in one personality. Esther knew both roles, and she synthesized both roles. She knew how to use both roles in one personality. It's not a divided personality. It's one personality. Now we can understand an unbelievable medrash. The Rav doesn't say this. It dawned on me after I learned the Rav's comments. I said, that's what the medrash means. The medrash plays on how many provinces were in Achashverosh? 127. How old was Sarah when she died? 127. And the Medrash says it's not by accident. Sarah and Esther are alike. There are so many similarities, the Medrash says, between Sarah Imenu and Esther. And they play on this 127. Why 127? Well, now, do you remember Rashi on 127? So let's go back, and the brilliant analysis, by the way, of the Rav on Rashi's 120. Remember, how does the Torah say? She was 100, she was 20, she was 7. So what does the Medrash say? 100, Sarah was concurrently 7, 20, and 100 years old, all at the same. She simultaneously was, what does that mean? You're 100, you're 20, and you're 7. Brilliantly, the Rav analyzes that Rashi, which is quoting the Medrash. He's simultaneously, she was a mature adult while she had a childlike thinking as well. She synthesized both maturity and childlike, being very young and very old, representing the age, the adult, all in one person. And I quote the Rav, the ability to experience childhood, youth, and old age concurrently is a sign of the covenantal community. It's a sign of Klal Yisrael. of merging the adulthood, the maturity, and the childlike innocence all at the same time. When it comes, for example, to Torah study, what do you have to be? The child or a mature adult? A mature adult, right? You must be an adult. You have to think brilliantly. You have to think cunningly, 100%. When it comes to prayer and faith, child or adult? Child. Both prayer and faith require the child in us. Prayer is capable, as we noted, with an emotional expression. Child feels in the embrace by someone who loves him and will protect him, and that's the root of prayer. So too faith, emunah. Emunah requires a suspension of judgment. You can't be a cynic and be a Baal Mamin. You can't, right? You have to surrender your cynicism when you're a Baal Emunah. That a child does. Esther was just like Sarah Imenu. She was a child and an adult all at the same time. All that was her brilliance. If you want to ask how or what was the leadership style of Esther, she was an adult and a child all at the same time. She, on the one hand, teaches us the art of prayer for the community, right? Lech kenosis kol hayudim. And everybody is going to pray with me. Everybody is going to fast with me. And then she demonstrates the great leadership on how to strategize. She's a brilliant strategist, right? And she knows how to implement because she acts like the cunning adult. This is the personality of the heroic Jewish woman throughout the ages. Esther and Sarah are very similar. It's not just a cute idea of 120 and 7. It rather demonstrates that Esther and Sarah are very similar in that sense. They have this ability of being an adult and a child at the same time. Continue on. It says, fine. And you're going to fast for 3 days. Uvechein avo el hamelech. Uvechein avo el hamelech. Then I will go into the king. What does that mean? Uvechein avo el hamelech. Here, do you have a hummus? Take a hummus, please. There you go. We're on page 1256. 1256. Uvechein avo el hamelech. And then you're going to come to the key. Purim is not only a day of indulgence and merrymaking. We think it is. It's definitely, it sounds like a day of adult, right? It's hey, chayav anav levasumi ad lo yoda. A person is supposed to get drunk, right? Inebriated. But it's not only. Uvechein avo el hamelech, and then I'm going to go to the king. Was she called? Was she allowed to go? She's going to go and put herself into danger. That is the end. The indulgence and the merrymaking is the end of the story. The victory is chapter 10, right? Chapter 9, chapter 10. But before we arrived to the victory, we experienced enormous anxiety. Page 1256. We experienced enormous anxiety. Purim demands of us not only merrymaking, not only chayav adam livasumi ad lo yoda, getting inebriated, but what else does it demand of us? Introspection and reflection. Charity. You should know a charity is definitely, but that's for a different purpose. It demands of us introspection and meditation. It's interesting. In the time of the Gaonim, they said Tachanun on Purim. They said, the Rav always refers to this. Why did they say Tachanun? It wasn't debated. They said Tachanun. We don't anymore. We don't pass them like the Gaonim. But there was a period in Jewish history when Purim, you celebrated Purim, and what else did you do? And you said Tachanun. Why? Because Purim is not only a merry-making day, it's a day of introspection. So how do we demonstrate that today? Well, how do we introduce Purim? By Tanis Esther.
By Tanis Esther. We have.
What happened?
What happened here?
Okay, we have Tanis Esther. On the one hand, right, the Megillah is both a story of thanksgiving and both a book of reflection. We almost got extinct. We almost were totally annihilated, right? There are two stories in the Megillah. On the one hand, it retells the story of a terrified people being existentially threatened, correct? On the other hand, it tells the story of our victory, exhilaration of our victory. So it's two stories. The Rav notes that because it's impossible to place such contradictory moods into one day, Chazal came up with Tanis Esther. Because Tanis Esther is not the Tanis of Esther. Esther's was 3 days, and when was it? In Nisan. In Nisan. No, we're not even commemorating that. There's an opinion that yes, Tanis Esther commemorates that, but it doesn't make sense. The Sheiltos notes doesn't make sense because it's when it was in Nisan, and we're doing this on the 13th of Adar. So why do we do it? Why do we institute the 13th of Adar as a day of supplication, a day of introspection? Because you can't have the moods all wrapped in one. But we introduce Purim with Tanis Esther. What this reflects is that Tanis Esther and Purim are one continued celebration, if you will. First comes Tanis Esther with the reflection, then comes the celebration of the victory. Unlike Tanis of the Bechor, of the firstborn on Erev Pesach. Tanis of the firstborn and Pesach have really very little to do with each other. They're not integral parts of the same puzzle. Tanis Esther is part and parcel of Purim. You can't have, the Rav would always note this, you can't have Purim without introducing it to Tanis Esther. Because if you did, you'd be leaving out part of the story, wouldn't you? Most of this book is all about our anxiety. It's chapter 9, and 10 is only 3 psukim, but chapter 9 is all about the victory. What happened to chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8? What's that about? Our anxiety. How are we going to literally strategize? How is Esther going to win the day for us? How is she going to implement her great strategy? How is her cunningness going to surface and manifest itself? That's chapter 1 through chapter 8. Oh, that's Tanis Esther. That's when we reflect. And then chapter 9 is the tremendous celebration. But then she says in here in this pasuk, right in pasuk Tezayin in 16, and what are her last words? V'chasher avadati avadati. What does that mean? And she says, I'm not allowed to go. The king has a rule. Everybody in this country knows. If you're not summoned, don't you dare go unannounced, because you're going to lose your neck, right? You're going to be killed. And so what does she resigns herself to that fact. If he gets upset with me, I understand what's going to be happening to me. I'm gonna die, right? The chasher avadati avadati.
Avadati is a very strange word to use.
Avadati means I'm lost, totally lost. I'm annihilated. That's what the word means. Goodbye, Charlie. Or in this way, destroyed. The chasher avadati avadati. It's like gone. She's lost. There's no trace of her. That's what the chasher of, and she repeats the word avadati avadati, meaning I'm totally gone. Of course she's frightened. She's out of her wits frightened. Remember, we know that because what was her response to Mordechai when he first suggested it? I can't do this. And Mordechai convinces her. That was already what we studied last week. Okay.
This is
now
he said to her that this is the time
that right. He promotes her to realize Mordechai was at the beginning of chapter 4. Mordechai was way ahead of Esther. By the end of chapter 4, who's at the head? Esther. Esther now assumes these last psukim in chapter 4 that we're studying today is the evolution of Esther becoming the leader. Now, what is this Esther saying? Esther's heroism and willingness to potentially sacrifice her own life to save the community, right, became an example par excellence that was emulated throughout Jewish history. The Rav recounts the following story, an amazing story that happened in Vilna in the 18th century. Listen to this story. At the beginning of the 18th century in Vilna, there was an apostate. Apostate means a Jew who
City of Vilna?
City of Vilna in Lithuania.
In Lithuania. Okay.
Yes, city of Vilna was the most important city in Lithuania. It was where, that's correct. That's where he lived. There was an apostate who had been excommunicated and expelled from the Jewish community. Well, what was his reaction? Revenge. How did you expel me? So he became very upset with the Jewish community. In Vilna, there was a famous cathedral. It's very well known. I saw it from the outside. In Vilna, there was a famous cathedral which contained a famous icon. This is 18th century. The apostate stole the icon, and he hid it in the Aron HaKodesh of the old Beit Knesset of Vilna. And the Rav writes, he probably colluded with some priest or some clergyman, member of the clergy. Otherwise, he would never have gained access to the cathedral. Okay. He went to the Archbishop of Vilna, and he informed him that on Hoshana Rabbah, the Jews will take the icon. This is what he tells the Archbishop of Vilna. Will take the icon. They're going to place the icon on the altar of the shul, the bima, and take turns striking it with bushels of reeds. Oh, the Aravos, right? They're going to strike it with bushels of reeds. He suggested that they send someone to the old synagogue to find the icon hidden in the ark, and now go at the same time and search the Jewish homes, and you're going to find the reeds ready to be used. And that's exactly what happened. All 30 members, there was a council of Vilna in the 18th century, all 30 members of the council of the community of Vilna were arrested. Naturally, the verdict was foregone conclusion. It meant that they would all be tortured and murdered, and they would be burned at the stake. A certain individual named Ravman ben Ravman, that was his name, Ravman ben Ravman, approached Rav Shmuel Aharon. Rav Shmuel Aharon was the last chief rabbi of Vilna. He was a colleague and a contemporary of the Vilna Gaon. We're dealing 18th century. So he goes to Shmuel Aharon. He said that he was willing. Ravman ben Ravman goes to Shmuel Aharon, the chief rabbi. He says, I'm willing to accept the blame upon myself to save the community. If I turn myself in and I say I stole the icon, I'll be punished. He would tell the archbishop that he stole the icon and that the reeds were just an annual Jewish ritual which had nothing in common with the icon. And he would know, then he would be executed and the 30 members of the board would be saved. He asked Rav Shmuel whether he was permitted to do so. Am I allowed to give my life up? So Rav Shmuel Aharon said, listen, this is a very difficult question. I want to confer with the Vilna Gaon. Vilna Gaon is the greatest Torah scholar of the generation. Let me ask him. He asked Ravman to return in a few hours. I'm going to go see the Vilna Gaon. I'll give you an answer. Come back to me in a few hours. We know that Rav Shmuel consulted the Gaon. We know Rav Shmuel Aharon went and consulted the Gaon. We do not know what the Gaon told him. Later that night, on the night of Shmini Atzeret, Hoshana Rabbah, now it's Shmini Atzeret, Rav Shmuel asked someone to bring Ravman ben Ravman to his house. Ravman ben Ravman didn't come back on his own. Ravman ben Ravman, I would like to see him, the chief rabbi says. Ravman came to the house and told Rav Shmuel that he's decided already what to do. I don't need to ask you. I've decided. Rav Shmuel was flabbergasted. Didn't I tell you I want to go see the Vilna Gaon? And we'll see what the Vilna Gaon says, right? Ravman said, I've made my decision up. I don't care what the Gaon says. I'm doing what the Gaon says. Ravman said, I don't need the Gaon because I have Megillat Esther. Megillat Esther taught me how we're supposed to act. He had decided that based on the Megillah, Esther gave up her life, was willing to give up avadati. Esther was willing to give up her life. I can give up my life also to save the community. Ravman went that same night, no further discussion. He just left the chief rabbi's house and he surrendered to the authorities. The Parnasim, the members of the council, were all freed, and Ravman was tortured for months and then was executed on the first day of Shavuot in the 18th century. In front of the cathedral, they burnt him at the stake. After his death, a practice, the Rav noted, a practice was established that all the synagogues in Vilna would recite a Kel Mole Rachamim from Ravman ben Ravman, both twice a year, both on Hoshana Rabbah and on Shavuot. And the Rav said, I personally witnessed that Kel Mole in my own life. The Rav went a few times to Vilna, and he saw that they said this Kel Mole, and he learned this story from that. Why is this such an important story? The Rav says, because what did Ravman ben Ravman say? I learned it from Esther. Esther taught us you're willing to give up your life on behalf of the community. The Rav then noted that this is the central halacha out of Megillat Esther. It's the duty of the individual Jew to be willing to sacrifice when it comes to saving the Jewish community. And the Rav is writing right after the 6-Day War, these comments. And the Rav says, we see this to this very day, that's the way the Israeli army acts. He says, the Rav recounted that he now understands Eretz Yisrael. How did it work? The Rav reflected. He said, at the time, there were 700 soldiers that died during the 6-Day War. He said many of them didn't have to go to battle. They could have stayed home. Honestly, the army didn't say you must come, but they came. Oh, we saw exactly why I'm telling you this story. This Esther is not a story that doesn't have impact on our lives. Esther has impact on our lives more today than ever before. The Rav said about the 700 boys, he said they were Esther's, models of Esther. They were willing to go to battle because of why? The community needed it. The community needed, and they sacrificed their own lives. The very reality is what we saw now in October 7th. Over 300,000. How many of them came from all over? I think tens of thousands from all over the world. You have videos getting on El Al planes, and El Al said, "You're going as a soldier back. You don't have to pay. You don't have to pay." Right? The 100%. But they went because they were imitating Ka'asher avadati. This is the halacha. What?
The minute that they
Right.
have healed from their wounds,
They-
they're right back.
I can tell you on every mission that I've led, we went to Tel HaShomer, right?
Mhm.
2 ladies are here to testify. We went to Tel HaShomer where 300 chayalim are recuperating. And you go into their rooms and they could have lost a limb. And you ask, they might not have a foot, they might not have an arm, they might, in terrible, terrible situation. You ask them, so what are your plans? What do you mean, what are my plans? My plans are to heal and go back to battle.
Wow. My nephew, you were in the hospital when he was healing.
There you go.
My sister
Okay.
tried to fly through, but she.
Yeah, okay. Kasher avadati. That's the lesson of the halachic lesson of this book. The Rav says is right there in those 3 words. Kasher avadati. Esther taught us, and it's interesting. It's not a man teaching it to us. It's a woman. And that the Rav notes. The heroism of the woman, right? The woman teaches us the art of tefillah. The woman teaches us the art of being a leader that is cunning and is able to implement the strategy. And that's what she does. Now let's finish off. Pasuk Yud Zayin for today.
Behind the man too, a lot of times.
Yes, but she doesn't. The man is pushed to the side in this story. Mordechai steps aside. Mordechai doesn't. The greatness of Mordechai is Mordechai did more than that. That's correct. Mordechai guided her, but Mordechai did more than that. Mordechai was willing to assume the back burner, and he puts his ego to side because Klal Yisrael needs it. Let's finish off for today. Pasuk Yud Zayin 12:56. Vayavor Mordechai vayas kechol asher tziviso alav Esther. And Mordechai then left. Here it is. Mordechai takes the back burner and did exactly as Esther had commanded him. From now on, the rest of the story is Esther's story. This marks the full turning point in Mordechai and Esther's lives. Up until this point, Esther was willing to say, up until this point, she had to be convinced, right? But now at this point, when Esther assumes she's willing to sacrifice for Klal Yisrael, it turns into her story, right? She becomes she transforms herself. she becomes from student to teacher, right? From follower to leader, all in this parak, right? She becomes the leader. Originally, it was Mordecai who had to promote her, because Mordecai at the beginning of this chapter was way ahead of Esther. He had the vision. She didn't. Once she's convinced, she flies in a jet plane, right? She's off and running. Once he successfully inspires Esther to assume the role of redeemer, Mordecai is able to take the back seat and give Esther her space. Esther assumes this role. Why? So Chazal tell us back in the Gemara in Nida, Mem Hey Amid Base 45b, he says women are endowed with Bina Yisera. What's Bina Yisera? The Rav brilliantly analyzes. You see, the Rav doesn't look at Divrei Chazal as cute statements. They're brilliant insights into man's personality. I had a Shaliach B'nai Akiva when I was growing up in Cleveland. His name is Yecheskel Talam. He was a phenomenal social worker. He was the head of, from Haifa North, of all the social work department. He was brilliant. And he said, I went to school, I got my MSW, and after I studied for years in college, I realized the greatest psychologists and sociologists and social workers were the Jewish mother, right? The greatest, right? The greatest insights that you will receive on psychology, sociology, and social work are the words of Chazal in Shas. Chazal understood the human situation brilliantly, and the Rav looks at it through those eyes as well. He says, they say a cute statement, Bina Yisera, women have, that's cute, right? Everybody says, oh, women have Bina Yisera. No, it's not cute. It's a reality. What is it? Women are given that extra intuition, right? What is that extra intuition now based on what we've learned today? The capability of doing two things that men don't do well. Men do not daven as well as women. Women are far better than men at davening. And what else do we learn? Women are more cunning and capable of implementing their strategy than men. Women can figure out how to implement the strategy better than men. And you hear these stories over and over again in moments of crisis throughout history. You hear survivors of Holocaust will tell you the husband didn't know what to do. And suddenly the woman said, we're doing this, this, and this. What is that? What do you mean? The husband was the breadwinner. The husband was the mighty guy in the house. And suddenly he didn't know what to do in the crisis. Who came along with clear thinking? The Esther. The Esther, every time the Esther surfaces and she comes along and says, no, we're going to do this. No, we're going to do that. Why? Oh, because she has the Bina Yisera. God did not make man and woman identical. They are two different gifts that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives to us. The personality of a woman, the personality of a man. And the Rav demonstrates in this parak, we see Esther in this end of the chapter, we see Esther as the one teaching us prayer, right? Leich kenosis kol hayudim. Prayer on what level? Communal, right? Chana teaches us what? Individual. Esther teaches us how the community davens. And what else? The ability to come up with a strategy and implement it. Now, by the way, you'll understand the role of the mechitza via the Rav's insight. Why do men and women have to be separated during davening? The major point where we differed from the conservative reform. And the Rav argued, by the way, the separation, not the barrier. The barrier is the Rabbanon, the Rav said. The mechitza, the wall, the barrier is the Rabbanon. The separation is the Araisa. Why? Because what does the church say? The family that sits together, that prays together, right? The family that's, how does it go? Right, prays together, stays together. The family that prays together, stays together. They're the ones that came up. Up until the church, people were separate. Even pagans separated. They were men and women. We have documents. Men and women did not pray the same place. But it comes along the Catholic Church, and what did they do? They institute the pews.
Mhm.
What's the church made of? Pews. So the Rav felt that if we, by the way, if we don't have separation, what do we have? An Issa D'Oraisa, because we're imitating the church, right? It's a violation of you're not allowed to imitate the church. Okay. But the
we
Rav
came
comes,
first.
but the Rav comes along and he says the following. Do you know why we have a separation of separation of women and men during davening? Why do we have the mechitza? He says brilliantly. Now you can really appreciate it. He says, first of all, men and women daven differently. Their experience is a different emotional experience. But number two, he says, because man needs to be the lonely man of prayer. I don't mean man. Man and woman are the same here. I'm not talking about the physical. Man, prayer individual has to be a lonely person of prayer. Lonely man of faith, right, is the famous name of the most important essay that the Rav wrote, The Lonely Man of Faith. He also, if you will, wrote The Lonely Man of Prayer. What does he mean by that? When I sit with my family, I feel very comfortable. I feel secure.
Right.
Hey, my wife's on my one side, my children on my other side, hey, I feel like I have the safety net of the family. When I daven, what am I supposed to feel?
Insecure.
Insecure.
Oh,
That's correct.
interesting.
That's correct. It has nothing to do. Everybody thinks, oh, the mechitza, because the men can't keep their minds,
That's what I
focused.
thought.
Nonsense, he says. That's nonsense. Men can focus just like women can. You can focus. If you need to focus, you focus. That's not the reason. It has nothing to do with sexual stimulation. It has nothing to do with it. He says, why is it done? He says, because it's a brilliant insight. And then you have a hard time arguing with the brilliance of the mechitza, right? It's no longer a feminine, anti-feminist. Oh, it's brilliant. Women daven differently than men. Men daven differently than women. And man and woman have to be individuals, lonely people of prayer. They can't feel security when you daven. You have to feel, I'm insecure. And who do I need to help me? Hashem.
So why do you need a bigger face, and why can there not be a physical, just, like the lower?
Oh, so that was the whole question that the Rav raised. The
Because
Rav,
Freddie always said.
yes, so the Rav,
You don't look at us, we
Right.
don't look at you.
No,
So-
the Rav said minimum. The Rav wanted 5 foot up to the shoulder. He said that is a barrier that makes a
Physical
person
barrier.
right. That makes up to the shoulder. It doesn't have to be wall to wall. But okay, there are different minhagim when it comes to. I'm not even getting into. I just wanted to demonstrate an extra point that we can now understand where the Rav comes from, right? Based on the Rav's insights right here on these last few psukim of this chapter, how Esther's personality as a leader still has impact on our lives. Okay.
You would almost though expect that the woman, well, I guess Hannah did the individual prayer and Esther taught the communal prayer. Because I was thinking,
Right.
the woman, it makes more sense almost for the woman to be more involved and to teach the individual prayer than the communal prayer.
Well, the Gemara says, who teaches us how to daven? The halachos of davening. Davening, by the way, when we say the Amida, are we supposed to be loud? Are we supposed to be an undertone? Are we supposed to be heard? All the Gemara says in Brachos, who taught us? Chana. Chana taught us. Chana taught us.
What an unbelievable machine.
Yeah, Golda Meir is a brilliant leader.
Brilliant.
There's a YouTube that her comments on comments
Impressed with the women's
with
movement at all.
what?
She wasn't impressed. with the
No,
women's
not
movement
at all. No, not at all. But what she had to say about of Israel, you saw this YouTube, it's going around, you could just close your eyes and listen to it, and that's in 1974. 1974, 2024, it's still applicable. What she was saying about Israel and the attack and our enemy Okay, next week we'll continue. Yes.
How many years did this whole story from the Megillah, from the very beginning?
Oh, that's,
to the end? How
yeah.
many years?
It's certainly, I have to check what the Midrashim say, but it's not that long.
I thought it was at least 12 years.
No, it's not that long. It's not that, I mean, well,
From his
if it's
first
from,
party, from the party.
oh, I have to check.
until
I
the
have to
end.
check. I have to check.
Okay,
Okay.
and then how old was Esther when she came to the king?
The Navi doesn't tell us.
We don't know.
The Megillah doesn't tell us how old she is. Okay, doesn't tell us. Okay, excuse me 2 seconds. I'm just gonna sign off and we will pick up next week, okay? On to chapter 5.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, have a lovely day.
You too.